story that must be told. Here's a little story that must be told. Here's a little story. Here's a little story.
My name is George Kibuyan. I also go by Geo, formerly Geologic. Also go by Prometheus Brown. And I was born in Long Beach, California. My parents both immigrated from the Philippines. I spent most of my childhood in Hawaii. I didn't start out rapping or writing. I did it just for fun, and I didn't tell nobody about it. My pops had like the kind of boom boxes where you could plug a mic into. And then later on had like the karaoke, the tape deck karaoke thing. I remember like there was like a Naughty by Nature, I think like OPP. I had an instrumental for that. And I recorded not my own verses, but like my own version of the OPP verses. We were just a bunch of friends that was all at that point, you know, listening to a lot of hip hop, was reading Source magazines, was watching Yo MTV Raps, was trading VHS tapes of, you know, people would come in from like East Coast California and be like, oh yeah, we got to watch the battles from out there. And, you know, it was just this little subculture of kids, you know, like middle school, high school, out on the Bremerton side doing things. We would hear stories from like, oh, so-and-so's older brother went to the show, went to go see Cypress Hill at Rock Candy or something like that, right? And then we'll come back with those stories. And so when we were the younger kids in Bremerton, we at least had like a little bit of that to aspire to. There was a crew called Wicked Dialect, who were some cats from out of Bremerton, who when they graduated high school, they were getting on show, like opening up for cats. One of the guys who's in that crew, I think like his little brother, they started Wicked Dialect, but the Bremerton version. And so I was maybe 13 at the time, and those were the first cats that I met who actually like were on some like, yo, let's hang out and actually like get better at rapping. Let's write our own lyrics. Let's learn how to freestyle, you know, those kind of things. We took a stab at it, you know. We was definitely like more of the broke version, so we didn't have like the dope mixers and 1200s. We had like our parents' turntables and the Radio Shack mixer, and, you know, our house speakers. And some of it would be on the naval base too, because if you could get like your pops to rent out a spot for like $100 or something like that. So we did a couple of those shows, and those were the first times that I ever like rapped in front of a crowd. I was like the younger guy in the crew always. I was like 14 at the time, while the rest of the people going to these things were definitely in high school. But this was like a big deal back then for like a 13, 14-year-old kid to be stepping on stage, and everybody in the crowd was like 16, 17, 18, 19, right? First few times, bro, I definitely got looked at funny, got booed off stage a couple times. It just made me hungrier. Okay, now we're making tapes, like shitty ass, made in our own bedroom, and then making copies of those tapes, designing the actual, like, slip-in covers for the cassettes, making multiple copies and selling them. That was like the next step for me. So I started doing that. My homeboy ran deep. We kind of got a little hustle going by the time we got to high school, where he was selling mixtapes, and I was selling my raps, like, you know. And it was like this mutually beneficial thing, because he had this big like CD and record collection, and I could like pick and choose what instrumentals I wanted to use for my own mixtapes. Like cats in high school knew who I was. I was definitely like doing the talent shows and whatnot. Definitely gotten beat into stupid little hometown beefs with crosstown rivalry beefs and things like that. It was very much this thriving like subculture that I didn't know was actually part of the larger Puget Sound hip hop scene. It got bigger than I thought it was going to be honest. The transitions from being in a small, little thriving mobile DJ battle scene in Bremerton as a teenager to getting involved in the Seattle hip hop scene, starting at UW. That bridge to me was KCMU, the Sunday night show, weekly hip hop show, Rap Attack, which later became Street Sounds. But I started listening when it was Rap Attack, 6 to 9 p.m. Sunday nights on 90.3 FM. to know that there was a DJ in our own backyard who was playing stuff that we would hear, months before they would talk about it in other media. One, and then two, was always slipping in local stuff. So that's when we found out, like, oh, there's like people who legit like put out music, put out albums and rap out here. Before I even went to UW, I started coming over to go to shows if it was all ages, which was not that much, as folks know, with the whole teen dance ordinance and the lack of all ages venues in the 90s. But there was one viable one that I will always remember, and that was Rock Candy. Going to Rock Candy shows while I was still in high school. And then, of course, when I graduated high school, I went to UW. It was the only school I applied to, and so therefore the only school I got into. My first year, I was like a good student. Like, I was like, yeah, let me at least get like this 3.5 GPA. I was trying to do computer science, I think, at the time. But that didn't last very long, because towards the tail end of my freshman year, this was like 98, 99, multiple things happened. The .com thing was booming, and I somehow got plugged in. I got to shout out my big homegirl, Ethrina Reyes. She happened to be working for a couple things. There was Scratchcast.com, like one of the first ever attempts at 24/7 live streaming that was up in Lake City. And then there was a startup company, and it was called UrbanEarth.com, and they had like a little bit of startup money, and they were able to like actually hire staff. And so I was an intern for them for a little bit, but then they actually hired me on to be a writer. Like, I would actually have I get press passes using I represent UrbanEarth.com. Like, let me into the show for free, and I write about it. So that was like my first entry point into just kind of being involved in the scene. And then early sophomore year, so this was like around 99, I just happened to open the UW Daily newspaper one day, and there was a column written by this guy by the name of Mark Matsui, who wrote this article just talking about how shitty the situation is if you're under 21 to go to hip-hop shows, and basically lamented the fact that he was having to go up to Bellingham just to go to see the same show for the same artists who'd be on tour, but when they come to Seattle, they play a 21 and up show. I remember reading that, being like, yeah, tell me about it, bro. This sucks. And in the last paragraph of that column that he wrote, this op-ed piece, said, like, if you feel the same way, next meeting so and so at the hub. So I showed up, and then come to find out, yeah, this ragtag bunch of kids was just like me, just like frustrated, wanted to go to shows. Some of them were like aspiring rappers or producers or dancers. Some of them were like had the aspirations to actually throw shows already. Like, I think that's the energy that Mark brought, and like the homie Sam Chesno, Promo, this dude Gavin, Jupiter, Patry, the guy who I would meet, who would end up producing, and we'd start a group together called Blue Scholars. We met in that same setting. It was just a bunch of weirdos who were under 20, under 21. Benito, of course, who will go on, Massive Monkeys Crew, Soul Gorilla, all that. We didn't know what was going to happen. We just knew that at the very least we'd meet each other. It wasn't like started from scratch. It was like, oh, I remember seeing you at that show. I seen you at Rock Candy a couple times. I seen you at this other venue. Of course, like, we all listened to Rap Attack at that time, now Street Sounds, and KCMU was still on the UW campus. That late 99, early 2000s moment where I was doing my own thing. I was going to the open mics in Chinatown, doing my thing at Urban Earth. My big homegirl Ethrina opening up that door for me, and then finding my own like community of cats who were into hip hop on campus at the University of Washington. It's weird to think that it was all like in this very compact, like just a few months of my life where my whole life changed, and I met people who would eventually like change the trajectory of first throwing our shows and learning how to promote shows, how that part of the game works. But even almost having like an internship where I get to study up close like what these performers do professionally, like how they hold themselves on stage, and then behind the scenes getting to know like things like how to deal with their management and like how do they get their records distributed, how do they actually book tours. This was all game, and I was just soaking up in that like small time period. And so Student Hip Hop Organization of Washington was born in late 99, officially became a thing early 2000. And I think after those first couple shows, we started doing stuff at the Paradox Theater. That was my life for like the rest of my UW career. I think that's when I met y'all. Like Mad Crew. We definitely had some like Mad Crew, Student Hip Hop Organization of Washington collaborative shows that we sponsored, trying to get the respect of the OGs, which is a whole nother thing. But at least we had each other. At least like people who was like our same age, you know. Started on campus, but very soon after, like just it became a citywide thing. I've been trying to figure out this mystery because I think there's a truth at the heart of it all, but like everybody's is slightly different. So I'm gonna just preface it with that. Like this is my version. We met each other just going to show meetings, and we were just both these two goofy college kids who just wanted to be involved in throwing shows first and foremost. Like of course I was trying to do the rap thing. I was entering battles, but I wasn't taking it like super seriously or anything. I was more just wanting to be part of a hip hop community and part of this group that's throwing shows. So I didn't even really tell people. I didn't even tell like Mark or Sam or anybody. I know Mark definitely did play a role, and he knew that I was rapping on the low, and he knew that Saba was producing on the low. But we didn't know of each other, so he did make like the initial encouragement. He actually did give me the first CD of beats. Me and Mark were roommates at the time, so he played me that CD. He was like, I remember sitting here being like, yo, this is dope. Who is this? He was like, oh, that's Alexei. I'm like, Alexei? Like, he wasn't going by Sabzi at the time. He was Alexei. So I let him know. I was like, hey, I heard that those beats that you gave to Mark. And he was on some, well, fuck, you know, come over to the house and I'll show you what I'm working on. He was living near Frat Row at UW. He was in one of those houses where there's at least like 10 motherfuckers living there. And he had like his tiny room in the attic. And it was in that room where he had just a basic PC that had a cracked version of Acid, and he was making beats on that. And he showed me that, and I was blown away. It was completely foreign to me that like, yo, I'm making music with a computer, and it sounds dope. I remember that was the initial spark that made me like, yo, this guy's kind of on some like mad scientist shit. Like everybody makes music with their computer now, but trust me, in early 2000, it was not a thing. In fact, if you admitted to anybody that you made music with your computer, you got laughed at. You got laughed at out the room by an entire room of hip hop heads who said that's not real hip hop. Like, fuck out of here with that computer music. But I'm glad we stuck with it. I competed in those Brainstorm 1, 2, and 3, and that was one of those, you know, show Mad K Productions collaboration things, and it was actually real pivotal, I think, for me as far as like confidence went. And I think it also showed Saba, who was at all those things, that like, oh, this guy's serious, and actually wants to get better at this thing. Things moved at first very slowly, and then very quickly. We just kind of fucked around maybe for like a year and a half. It even took a while before we had a name. We went by Sabzi and Geologic for like maybe that first year, and then we settled on Blue Scholars. And then as soon as we named the group, just as I suspected, like things started happening even before we had an album out. Blue Scholars as a group played its first show not in Seattle, and we played at the Ash Street Saloon in Portland. So that was the birth of Blue Scholars on Stage. And then we came back and did a show up here in Seattle, and I think that solidified, like, we came, those two shows, me and Saba came back and was just like, yo, can we do this? At that point, we're like, we need to put out an album. We got to perform on Hip Hop 101, like, in '03, and just kind of showcase what we was doing. Hip Hop 101 was just a monumental show, period, as far as, like, at the time, pre-internet, pre-YouTube, like, just showing what was going on in here, like, locally. '03 to '04, we just kind of hunkered down and said, like, we got to finish this album. There's a viable, like, path to being just, like, underground, indie, do-it-yourself kind of ethos. And so we just followed what we knew from that and utilized every connection that we possibly could to make that first album happen, whether it's, Saba using his credit cards, to me hitting up Zach Johnson and Kareem at Stuck in a Needle and kind of cashing in my ticket from, like, being their little lackey for a little bit. We were, like, all in our 20s, as young as, like, 16, as old as 25, like, really just throwing big shows that, like, 500, 600, 700 people was coming to. By the time 2004 came around is when the first 11-song Blue Notebook, first edition of the Blue Scholars self-titled record, came out. Things just changed. Now there was multiple all-ages venues. Suddenly you got Chop Suey, you got the Vera Project, you got multiple all-ages venues. These were the years that KCMU got all that Paul Allen money and moved off campus and became KEXP. Now they have the bandwidth to sound good in Bremerton. That wasn't the case back in the day. Who have DJs whose complete ethos is to play at minimum one local song per hour. I think they started really paying attention locally. The local press started paying attention too. In the Rocket, I remember Samson had a column in there where he'd talk about local hip-hop in there. And I remember Sam Chesno took over that. And then when the Rocket shut down, Sam was able to transfer his weekly column to The Stranger. But then Larry Gatsby of Cancer Rising ended up taking over for that weekly column. Then from that point on, you had, like, a legit presence in the alt weeklies, which had, like, a way bigger audience than just the record stores. Like, that Stranger newspaper is on every corner of every block of this city. Once we started traveling and doing shows, people would straight up say, like, hey man, I hope you don't mind, hope you ain't mad I downloaded your shit, like, for free, but I'm here to buy some merch, and bought tickets to the show. I think it's dope that you landed on the music for free on some file sharing platform, and then that got you to want to, like, actually support, versus what I think is a more passive fandom, which is like you just go to fucking big Best Buy or Sam Goody or whatever, buy the CD for $20 and call it a day. Word of mouth started spreading. And there are some things that were just forces bigger than any of us, right? Like the internet becoming what it was. We had come off of like a year and a half of a pretty decent run of playing more like the Chop Suey, Numos size venues around the city, and then actually hopping on legs of different tours, whether it's in the Midwest or the West Coast, and getting our first taste of like being touring artists. It was a big deal. Like, yo, only a few of us actually get a chance to even see what that's like. And we didn't know it was going to get any bigger than that. We were actually happy at that point. We're like, yo, this is dope. We had our first album re-released with new packaging, a local label, a legit label, Light in the Attic Records, who was able to actually distribute our record in record stores and we didn't have to like put it on consignment and ship it ourselves. Like, that was a big deal. We're like, yeah, fuck yeah. But 2006, opening up for Kanye, something definitely happened that night. It was big. Everybody kept telling me how big that was. I kept meeting people years down the line who were like, that was the first time I saw you guys or heard about you guys. I've been going to Bremerton my whole life, and that was the first time I saw a group just like do hell of songs about Seattle. Just do like almost like way too many songs about Seattle, right? We didn't do it on purpose. We were just kind of modeling ourselves really after the hip hop music we grew up on, whether that be Sir Mix-a-Lot talking about his posse on Broadway, or Nas talking about Queensbridge, or a Tribe Called Quest talking about Linden Ave. Like, it was just part of being a hip hop artist to just, represent where you're from, right? We actually got flown down to LA, bro. Like that, later that week. Like, I guess there were people who were in the crowd who worked for various different labels. And like a week later, we were playing the Viper Room in LA in front of like a bunch of different record label folks who were all trying to sign us like that week. That's how crazy like this shit was at Bumbershoot. But let's use this opportunity for this spotlight that's really shining on us to show that it's not just us. So that's when December 2006, when the idea to do the program, to do 5 nights in a row at Numos came about. We were definitely trying to spotlight as many other people as we could, to be like, yo, we're getting so much attention right now that it'd be dope to just like have that same spotlight be shared with homies and people that we just know in the scene. We made it a point to have like a lot of Seattle representation, but we also had like cats from Vancouver and Olympia and whatnot. From Kanye, opened up for Kanye in September 2006, to the program at Numos 5 nights in a row, all sold out in December 2006. That's one point. And then June of 2007 is when me and Saba's second album, Bayani, Blue Scholars, Bayani came out. That got our foot in the door into the Mecca. You know what I'm saying? Like, people we grew up listening to started knowing who we were. That same year, rest in peace, Guru Gangstar, like he had me and Ross Sion from Common Market on his mixtape. I ended up being able to do tracks with Buckshot of Black Moon and KRS-One, and I was uncomfortable for a while just even saying this kind of shit out loud because it would sound like I'm bragging, but I'm at a point in my life where like, I'm proud of this shit, and I'm proud to like tell my kids when they ask me like that Bumbershoot in 06 to the program in late 06 to the second album dropping in 2007, and then on the 1 year anniversary of that 2006 Bumbershoot was the 2007 Bumbershoot. That was the one where we did like a 17-minute version of North by Northwest. You know what? I'm going to tell you the real story. A band who was supposed to show up that day canceled. We seriously had like 3 hours to prepare. We didn't have like a full-on set prepared at the time to fill in what I think was like more than an hour. For like the first 20 minutes of that, it was actually a good medicine set. It was like me, Macklemore, Gabriel, Teodros, and Kings, and we did like maybe 3 or 4 songs. So then at that point it became a Blue Scholars set, but it was like a mini Blue Scholars set. We were like, yo, let's just play North by Northwest until they kick us off stage. I was like, unless you're the Wu-Tang Clan, there's no reason you should have like too many rappers on stage. And then here we are, like one of my biggest memories ever is being on stage with a bunch of other rappers in front of a crowd and just like letting any and everybody who was the homie kick 16 to 32 bars on a beat that was on loop for like 17 minutes or so. Yeah, one of my most memorable nights ever. I credit many threads in my life, many first-hand experiences, many mentors, organizations that all added the ingredients to the pot that became my life as an organizer, cultural worker, speaking out on issues and all those things, and then ultimately putting it both into my music and what I do outside of the music. I have to credit the music and hip-hop music itself as the starting point of it. I definitely have to credit just seeing Public Enemy videos when I was 8, 9 years old, and then listening to records by like Ice Cube, or later on like The Coup. I remember when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X when I was in high school. That experience actually led me to questioning and wondering like, yo, what is there something in my history that that I can relate to. Seeing that there was a thread of resistance towards injustice, towards like the unjustness of capitalism and the legacy of slavery and colonialism, like all these things I started learning more about. It became apparent to me that, okay, I'm actually in the right place. But by the time I started gaining like a political understanding, I was like, oh shit, like there's something deeper there. This is a generational legacy of like actually speaking out. This culture is, it has the power to disseminate information on behalf of like a marginalized group of people. Although not black identified myself, I want first and foremost just like recognize that like this is one, like what it's rooted in. The thread that comes in that like really fires me up even more was becoming aware of like the injustices that were happening in the Philippines and drawing a connection to my own family and my own communities. Like, yo, this is why we're even here in the first place. This is why we even had to leave, making the conditions in the country so fucked up that our families had to seek out economic opportunities elsewhere. And I know like there's many different ways we can resist. And I think also Seattle plays a big part of it. I don't think it's any accident that like when the summer of 2020 popped off, that like it was like the first and only place like people took over a whole ass police station, and occupied like entire blocks of the city. Maybe I've been reading too many Andre 3000 interviews, but I'm definitely on this tip where I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to try to figure out like what's next. I think for a lot of people have been asking when and if Blue Scholars would ever put out another album. I can't ever completely close the door on that, because as long as I'm alive and as long as Saba's alive and we're still friends, and that is the case, then there's always possibilities. Blue Scholars is bigger than just me and just him. It's that plus an entire history, and it means a lot to so many other people too, that we don't want to disrespect the memory of what we built. And I'm actually hoping to finally, in my mid-40s, release my first solo full-length album. I think at this point I just want to make the music. As of right now, I think it's more important that I just get in the act of doing it. It's not too late. I still have this fire to make music, to share it with the world.